Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, children over the age of 18, I am Ortiz, and this is my main man, Travis. And today on Terminology Tuesday, we are going to talk about two terms that always kind of get confused. So we're going to be talking about closing costs and escrow. So go ahead, grab that pen and a piece of paper and your favorite beverage, and we'll be right back to break down those two terms. See you in a minute. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are back and we are going to be talking about those two terms, closing costs and escrow. And we're going to go ahead and start off with the first one. Travis, please inform the folks what exactly are closing costs when it comes to a mortgage.
Well, first off, if we're having the closing cost conversation, congratulations are typically in order because we've reached a point where we can start to put some numbers together and get you an idea of that check that you're going to be bringing to closing. Closing costs, I'll give you my sales answer first. The most important piece of closing costs is that you should be comparing loan estimates for these items. We shouldn't be comparing fee worksheets, emails, anything. Legally, once we've offered something on a loan estimate, if that is accepted, legally, that's what you'll receive. Too many times we're getting clients that are coming to us with fee sheets from competitors, with loan cost breakdowns. You're going to see every name under the sun, but most importantly, most of them somewhere in very, very tiny writing is going to say this is not a loan estimate. Please get a loan estimate before you move forward. The reason why that's important is because most oftentimes when we're discussing closing costs, we're comparing lenders, we're comparing those costs. So what I want to make sure that we understand is that we're always going to compare these with a loan estimate. Closing costs are made up of a million different things. They're broken into buyer and seller portions. As a buyer, I'm typically going to be paying any origination, which is charged by the lender. Most oftentimes you'll see that's a flat fee. Sometimes it's a couple $100. Sometimes it's $1,000. Sometimes you'll even see that it's a percentage of the loan. Origination is essentially what the lender is making. Sometimes they'll call those origination fees. Sometimes they call them underwriting fees. Sometimes they call them commitment fees. Section A of the loan estimate is where you'll find this information. Section A is where you can truly compare lenders because that is what the lender is making on the transaction. Typically, you're also going to be paying for, quite possibly, you're paying for your appraisal at closing. Sometimes you pay for that up front. Other times, it is still considered part of your closing cost. Okay. One of the things it says is going to tell us a little bit about later is our escrow. Our escrow is primarily made up of taxes and insurance. Part of our closing costs that we're paying as a buyer are prepaid taxes and insurance. The goal is when you take over that home ownership, you have always paid 12 months in advance on your homeowner's insurance so that you're always going to be covered. That's the goal. Obviously, that doesn't always work out that way. But it should set up that way for you if you properly calculate your closing cost. Other items that you're going to pay for as a buyer, there's going to be title fees, closing fees. Those are dictated by the title company. Most oftentimes, the title company is your choice as a home buyer, but we're always going to take our partner's lead. So most often our real estate agents are indicating who our title company is going to be. Again, transfer taxes in some cases are paid by the buyer. One of the things that we'll talk about is how important that contract is. With new builds, you should fully expect at times with new builds that you're going to be paying not only the buyer's portion of the closing cost, but also the seller's portion of the closing cost. Seller's portion of closing costs is typically made up of things like transfer taxes. We have many states where the seller covers the owner's title policy, which is the title policy that we'll discuss on another Terminology Tuesday, but protects you as the home buyer. One of the biggest pieces of the closing costs for a seller is going to be those transfer taxes. That's basically going to be paid almost like a sales tax. So the more expensive the home, the higher those transfer taxes go. Um, and obviously, that list that we just gave you is only a piece, but it's what I feel are some of the most important items to consider when considering closing costs. Says anything that I missed on that?
I'd probably say the only thing, I mean, we could touch base on it real quick is like, because you not only will you be a buyer someday, you might also actually be a seller. So in terms of like the closing costs with the seller, um, just I'll give it like a quick rundown. The seller is more than likely going to pay all real estate fees associated, so like the commissions or any home repairs. They may also pay some title and closing fees, any attorney fees for doc prep and deed prep, any prorated taxes or any prorated homeowners association dues, as well as any other miscellaneous fees like home warranty, any seller concessions or buyer's closing costs, and any wire fees that may be associated with the loan. So that's probably like the only real piece because I mean, I believe they should know, like, one day you're a buyer and then maybe down the line you're a seller. So it's definitely something that you will want to know both sides of the coin when it comes to closing costs in regards to the transaction. And with that, was there anything that I may have missed in regards to the seller side?
Solid rundown. I mean, you mentioned the word seller's concessions. I'm sure we'll have a Terminology Tuesday on that one day. One of the things that we run into a lot is the question of can I roll in my closing costs? And the answer to that is no, not formally. Oftentimes, a realtor and a broker like ourselves would be happy to show you how to structure an offer so that we can get some of those closing costs covered in the transaction. But again, I think that's kind of a 2.0 thing, maybe a topic for another day. So if this is something that you'd like to learn more about, please comment below so that we can dig into this deeper for you. But as we mentioned, one of the biggest pieces of your closing costs is taxes and insurance. That's one of the biggest pieces of your escrow as well. So, Tez, tell me about escrow, how it's going to impact me as a buyer and even long term as someone who continues to pay my mortgage. What type of things make up escrow and why is it important?
All right. Well, that's a great question, and I appreciate it. So when it comes to your escrow account, ladies and gentlemen, that is essentially, I used to equate it to like a little piggy bank for the house, right? So it's basically an account in which they set aside funds to make sure that your taxes, your insurance, as well as any mortgage insurance that you are paying is covered. And we talked about the different mortgage insurances and a different terminology Tuesday. I'll make sure that we link that at the end of the video so that everyone can go back and look at that. But this account is basically where it's a nest egg so that every however so often down here in North Carolina, I believe they are paid quarterly when it comes to your taxes. So that's every 3 months, as well as your insurance every 12 months. When that bill comes due, the bank will automatically, or your lender will automatically send off a check to those entities to make sure that they are paid on time and in full. Now, every year, what they do is what's called an escrow analysis. So, what they do is they make sure that they check with whatever county, check with your insurance company to make sure that the numbers that they have for your taxes and insurance are correct, right? And then they make the adjustment accordingly. So, most of the times when people say, like, hey, my payment is going up, it has nothing to do with the loan. 99.9% of the time, it is because of your taxes and insurance. So it's kind of a good thing and a bad thing in the sense that if your taxes go up, more than likely your property value has gone up. So you have gained some equity in the property, but you're going to get a nasty escrow shortage depending on how much they've assessed your property and how it increased your taxes. All right. And then the same thing can go for insurance purposes if they reevaluate your property to see, like, if the crime rate or the neighborhood, which we talked about that as far as mortgage insurance goes, if that makes as a factor in your premium, that could also change your escrow in that regard. So that's kind of like it in a nutshell as far as what the escrow account is. So basically, long story short, it's a piggy bank to where the lender will make sure that every so often when the taxes are due. So definitely check with your mortgage broker in your state to find out when your taxes are paid, because I came from a state called Michigan and we had the craziest taxes I've ever seen as far as how they were paid. If I'm not mistaken, Trav, they were paid in arrears, correct?
That's correct. And there are other counties that are not. So it just makes it even more difficult.
Yep. So definitely make sure you talk to your mortgage broker or your mortgage lender to ask, hey, how are my taxes being paid? And then more importantly, ask how much upfront they typically collect, because that will also affect what Travis had talked about in regards to your closing costs, because that will definitely, if the person doesn't know how much that they need to collect and they're giving you a loan estimate, they could short how much they should collect. So then when it comes to closing, you'll get a nasty bump and increase in what your closing costs are. All right. So definitely want to make sure you are, when you're comparing apples to apples, like Travis said, with those loan estimates, the closing costs, especially in the escrow, check how many months they're collecting and make sure it's up to par with what the state that you're in is actually required them to collect. I believe I got everything, Trav. Did I miss anything?
No, that was a great rundown. One thing about the months being collected, what we're seeing a lot of times now, because the market is very competitive. So again, on that loan estimate that you receive, you're going to see how your escrow is broken down. You're going to see how many months are being collected, and I can tell you that as far as we're aware, there's no penalty for working with a broker where they're going to charge you more for taxes or they're going to charge you more for insurance. So if those figures aren't correct, then the get out of jail free card for every mortgage, loan officer out there is, if it's taxes and insurance, we can't control it. So that's how those numbers typically will end up moving. So another check in the box for getting an official loan estimate before you make any decisions. And I think we're overdue to break down a loan estimate. So if that's something you'd like to see, go ahead and hit those comments so we can know that. But great rundown of the escrow test.
All right, thanks, brother. Thanks. I appreciate it. So, ladies and gentlemen, I believe that wraps up this edition of Terminology Tuesday. As always, if this is something that you found beneficial, go ahead and hit that like button, that subscribe button, and that bell notification. So that way you're updated for every time we do upload some new content in regards to this mortgage knowledge. So, with that being said, I'm Tez. This is Travis, and we're your favorite LOs. We'll see you next time, ladies and gentlemen. Peace.